Hey, everybody, and welcome to The Yard Sign, the most important and relevant podcast in politics. Your host, as always, Johnny Torres. Well, I guess I shouldn't say as always, given that the last two shows have been hosted by none other than Mr. Aníbal David Cabrera. Thank you so much for filling in. We've got a great show for you tonight, a bit of a trimmed-down cast for tonight, but as you can see, we're playing around with the set here, live from Bullhorn Communications in beautiful Ybor City, Florida, the heart of Tampa Bay. We're having a lot of fun here. Thanks again to Travis Horn and the guys from American Media Group for allowing us to borrow their space here. Lots to talk about, and we're going to get pretty specific on one of tonight's topics, given that we have a candidate joining us tonight. So our topics tonight is the drama that continues over in Congressional District 13. Also, we are going to be talking about campaigns and elections, what you know, what you don't know, and how that can cause all kinds of trouble, and already is, even for some of our local Republican organizations. We're also going to get down into the topic of education. We're doing an education spotlight today because that correlates directly with tonight's guest, which is Allie Marie Legg, who's our school board candidate here in Hillsborough County. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on. You're now, for this cycle, our second school board candidate. So, you know, which is cool because typically school board candidates don't get a lot of love in the media. You know, it's one of the most important races in our community, and typically gets overlooked by even our local media.
Yep. Very true.
You know, ends up in some, seventh or eighth page, in the news. Mm-hmm. And certainly these are the topics that are affecting our future and our kids. And so we're going to boil down, we're going to get down into what's happening here in Hillsborough County, and really a reflection of how that is what's happening nationally, right?
Yes.
When it comes to education and your candidacy. So we'll get into that. But first, let's go ahead and get into tonight's first topic, which is Congressional District 13, which, as Aníbal would say, continues to be quite the dumpster fire over there. And Aníbal wanted me to remind, Travis Horn wanted me to remind everybody that apparently his crystal ball, actually we should bring it out. Maybe somebody can bring out the crystal ball. It needs to be recalibrated because if you were watching last Monday, we were having a very civil conversation, about what's about all the candidates and CD13 and what an interesting race it's going to be. And little did we know the firestorm that was, or the dumpster fire, as you would say, that was going down behind the scenes.
Well, I feel that, it all happened that day.
Right.
So a lot of us didn't know the information that was happening. A lot of us didn't understand what was going on. We saw the update and we were very shocked of what was happening.
Right.
And because of that, a lot of us just didn't know what to say. If it was true, and a lot of us said, if it was true, then let's go for the full extent of the courts and this needs to be prosecuted. If it's not, then we need to just figure out why would someone make such an allegation. And then 3 days later, the morning and after, basically, it blows up in everyone's timelines that there was a 30-minute recording of the actual phone call that Braddock was having with this political operative in Pinellas County. Yeah. And it was everything that you wanted it to be. We had Russian and Ukrainian hit squads. Someone has $500 million sitting in Malta. This was phenomenal, and it kept on getting better and better. And as a political person, I don't want to say that I was smiling the whole time, but I was in more shock than anything else that someone would actually release a 30-minute recording of this outrageous, probably unhinged individual.
Well, that's the crazy thing, right? Quite literally, because originally we were looking at this and there's like, okay, this is a little bizarre. Mm-hmm. And look, call me misogynist all you want, but Anna Luna could be a little dramatic, okay? And we've seen antics from her where she gets just completely just blown out of proportion over, again, the Twitter checkmark thing. I think she just drilled on that way too long, to the point where nobody cared anymore. It's like, we get it. Okay, yes, we know that Twitter, Facebook, all these platforms are working against us, right? So at first I was like, okay, is this hearsay? Is this just a bunch of guys talking? What was really the context behind this? And then, like Anibal said, little did we know there was a quite a lengthy recording of this where William Braddock got very specific as to not only how he would execute such a threat, but also under what conditions he would execute such a threat.
Actually, no.
It's a recording.
Yeah.
Politico has it. Bay News 9 had it. Bay News 9, which is typically very reserved in terms of what they carry on air, and they played the whole recording. It was unbelievable. And look, this is a guy who came out of nowhere, unknown to the area. I believe he came originally from Orlando. The Orange County area.
Well, that explains everything.
And and like they say, the Sunshine State is where shady people come to live.
I've never heard that.
Never heard that? Oh yeah.
Where'd that come from?
Yeah, there's a guy in Miami who came up with that, and I think it's brilliant. And we knew that this race was going to be, again, crazy to begin with. We knew it was going to be just the race to watch because there was going to be all kinds of insanity going on. Mind you, I think this is just the beginning. Can this be topped? I hope not, because it's pretty severe what's going on.
We literally have a smoking gun, no pun intended, in regards to like assassination requests and campaign finance abuses that he talked about when it comes to funneling money from one individual into the campaign. Anything that you could have done wrong, he did wrong in one phone call from all aspects of law and campaign finance rules. And it just tells you that he was a novice. He didn't know what he was talking about.
Right.
Something that a lot of people don't understand. You can't just get up one day and run for Congress.
Well, we've seen plenty of people do that.
That's what I'm saying.
We've seen plenty of people think that they can do that. But the reality is,
I didn't know what name to throw in there without making that comment.
There's plenty of people we can call out on that front about not being qualified or ready to run for the positions they're running in. Again, we knew this was going to be just a circus to watch. Certainly, we didn't think to this extent.
No.
But what I'm really interested to see, because I still think Luna took this again somewhat out of proportion.
Do you think?
Including Mackey and Tito, who, as far as the call goes, seems to have no involvement in this whatsoever. But she did file similar documents against them, or that included them as defendants in this issue.
I will say that tomorrow is the hearing for this whole thing. So if there is additional documentation that shows the tie-in with Mackey and Tito, which I honestly don't believe will have large evidence, I think William probably will say that he said those names, but I highly doubt you're going to see any real documentation to show the connection. Also,
but that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Is obviously the recording is very clear as to who was making the threat.
Yeah.
Why bring the other two candidates into it when it almost discredits? Luckily for her, there's a recording. Because if
there wasn't a recording, this wouldn't be a thing.
Yeah, had Matt, Tito, and Amanda Mackey, again, being that they have also mentioned in this document, almost completely discredits the whole thing, because it's obvious that, again, three campaigns to collude this way, and certainly with something as serious as a life threat, I think is absurd, and so, yes, obviously it was a very real threat here that we're dealing with, but I still think in the public eye, I think she overreached by including Amanda Mackey and Matt Tito, unless there's some other evidence that we haven't seen yet.
There could be reason for her doing that. You never really know.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and again, maybe there is more evidence that hasn't been presented yet.
I think a lot of people.
But the phone call is clear cut.
I think a lot of people really did, and I'm going to use the word misogynist. They were really like, okay, whatever. He didn't really do whatever he did. Again, 3-4 days of just up in the air, and then the phone call gets released, which is illegal in Florida technically, but at the end of the day, it was a threat.
Right.
So it was a legitimate threat. So I don't have a problem with that whatsoever. But I think what really needs to be discussed is that if she put the names in there, odds are there must be something there because she's already proven that she did this for a reason.
Right,
So
unless, like you said, he mentions them.
yeah, but if he mentioned them in some additional documentation, then yeah, she has to throw it in there because they're talking about like Russian hit squads. Like you gotta talk about
Yeah,
it.
and you have to take that stuff
You
seriously.
gotta take it super
Especially
serious.
when you're in the public eye like that. Like, you call them out, you know.
Well, but that's the
and-
thing. Initially, when we were talking about this story a week ago, we thought that it was just like I'm going to take her out, like in a competitive,
Right.
political kind of way. And then when we hear the recording, and it's like,
She gonna
he's
take
literally
her
talking, about Russian and Ukrainian hit squads.
That's serious.
And claiming that he can get them here within 24 hours, and how if somehow she becomes the nominee, I mean, again, this is
Right.
all very thought out,
Yes.
very planned. I mean, it's frightening. Again, especially from somebody that is new to the area, somebody that's not been involved in the political process here in Tampa Bay before. And again, like we thought that race was going to be crazy already. I mean, I certainly didn't think it would be to this level.
I never thought it was gonna be crazy. I thought it was gonna be spicy. And it's going to be fun to watch and enjoyable because you see everyone's still in their same positions that they were 2 years ago.
Yeah. Mhm.
So it's not like nothing has really changed. With Matt Tito allegedly going to jump into the race, it gets some kind of flavor into this a little bit more. You have a lot of people.
Which he hasn't officially announced that he's going to jump
and
in.
you still have some people saying that they're going to get rid of the district completely and just absorb it and move it somewhere else. So there's a
That's
lot.
super speculative.
wow.
Yeah, but that's also no one knows what's going to happen. A lot
Well,
of people that are in control of writing the district and drawing those lines could themselves jump into the race.
Yeah, but the thing is, and I think it might have been Joe or somebody made this point on one of the shows you were hosting, which is that Pinellas County is too densely populated for it not to pretty much be its own district. So it would be incredibly difficult to draw a district and it not include most, if not all, of Pinellas County as it does today. The variation from when Bill Young was the congressman there to when it got redrawn, allowing for David Jolly, to then win as a Republican, and then Charlie Crist to win it as a Democrat. Again, were very, very minor changes. So it's already been redrawn, and it's one of those things where I think there's only so many ways to slice it.
At the end of the day, we're going to see if William Broderick even shows up to the trial hearing tomorrow, and what lawyer is willing to even use him. Well, he can represent himself. He's a lawyer. So I'm really excited to see what William.
But see, that's another thing.
Do you think
is
he'll show
that
up?
he's mentioned there's been mention that he's a lawyer, but nowhere on his website and the people close to him have not said that he's actually a lawyer.
I think Politico mentioned that he was a lawyer.
That's where I saw it, but again, nowhere is that mentioned, and I don't think that was even on his website. So I wonder if it's one of those things where he maybe attended law school, but never took the Florida bar, never kind of took it to the next step to make it
Like,
official.
did he log into DeBry or did he attend DeBry?
That's right.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, let's see what happens tomorrow. Let's see if he shows up. Allegedly, I would assume that he's no longer in the country. Oh, I said that on purpose, by the way. I don't think he's even in the country because he said that if he didn't win, he would have to leave the country. So, I mean, good luck to you. Yeah, I would say he's probably somewhere in the Maldives of some kind.
Yeah, Allie's been real reserved during this
Real
topic.
reserved.
I don't think she realized what she was walking into today. Because again, we kind of really don't hold back, and you'll see that even with the other topics that we're talking about today. But again, this is just the beginning of the cycle. This is not even the beginning of the cycle.
I know.
Technically, the political cycle doesn't even start till January, right? For
it's
most people,
so crazy.
there's still going to be, from what I've heard, 2, maybe 3 more people announced in that district.
Really?
On either side of the aisle.
wow.
But, there's already, I believe, 2 or 3 candidates on the Democrat side. And then, of course, we've got this insanity going on the Republican side. I mean, this made national news. I'm surprised it didn't make a bigger splash nationally. But, again, it may be because... And I'll kind of frame it the way I truly believe is that the media outlets don't want to give maybe Anna more publicity.
Right.
Because they realize, okay, we can cover this story, but then we're also giving her publicity for her campaign at the same time. And so maybe there's that kind of, that kind of line that they maybe are not wanting to cross.
Right. Who knows when it comes to the media, right? Like, they have their own
Sure.
agenda, so.
Right. All right. So again, thank you to everybody for watching. We got our ombudsman Hector Gonzalez watching. What's up to our buddy Joe, who's not on the show today, but certainly one of our regulars. Laura, Miss Stewart, Matt. What's up, Matt? Let's go ahead and tap back into today's topics.
What's up, Anthony and Laura?
Oh, okay. So can you go ahead and bring up
Anthony's from Chicago. Well, he is officially now a Tampanian. He moved from Chicago to Tampa last week.
Wow.
Anthony? Which Anthony?
Anthony.
Oh, he's watching the show.
Yeah, he's watching the show.
Oh, okay, got it. All right. So, Jubilee 2.0, which is that term is somewhat new to me, but Jubilee 2.0, for those of you watching, is also known as Juneteenth now. And so we're going to go ahead and dive into Juneteenth. And this is something that, again, we have a group where we plan what we're going to talk about on here on today's show. And Joe, who I was hoping would be on the show today, had some very strong thoughts about this. But, the Cliff's Notes is really this is the day that slavery was abolished, starting with the state of Texas. Like officially abolished, right? I mean, that's how I understand it. We had the Emancipation Proclamation and all that, but as far as the states actually coming down and saying, "Hey, we're putting an end to this,"
It was Texas.
at the state level, Texas kicked things off.
It was Texas.
And then that then spread across the country.
So I think it was more of just Texas. In Texas itself, there wasn't a lot of Union soldier presence. So a lot of slave owners from plantation owners and things like this from other surrounding areas in the South moved to Texas because they felt like it was a safe place for them to continue to violate the Emancipation Law. So what happened was Major General came down and put them on notice and said, you're violating, the Emancipation Law, and everybody is free. So there's nothing more powerful than an informed people, right?
Right.
So when the Emancipation Law took place and it was passed, a lot of the slave owners in the South hid that information from them, because when you're informed, you're able to rise up and you're able to fight for yourself. Now, keeping that information hidden makes you more easier to control.
Right.
So, and that's what happened.
Well, and so, and certainly having Hector, here you go. Hector's already plugging in notes in the comments section. But my question is, was this prior to Texas becoming a state, because it was its own republic at one time, hence the Republic of Texas,
right?
And or was this post-republic, where it had already become a state, and then allowing for the United States to come down and say, hey, you got to follow suit here, and that's kind of where the timeline I'm really fuzzy on, but this kind of I think harkens back to really the overall message behind this, right? And I believe even President Trump said at one point that Juneteenth should have become a federal holiday. Now, don't quote me on that, but I believe he, or at least I heard that he said that at one point. And I would say maybe within the last 10 years was probably when I first heard about it. Now, President Joe Biden making it an official holiday, but as some people are saying, they're feeling that this is one more way to kind of sow division in the country, to kind of resuscitate, these strong feelings about slavery in this country, and I don't necessarily see it that way, especially coming from the Emancipation Party. Being a Republican, I think we should have been the ones to have made this a federal holiday a long time ago. Yeah. And we really don't. That should be something we do celebrate in its own right, because as, many in the Black community have said, even though we celebrate our independence on July 4th, that didn't include independence for everybody.
Right.
And so I think it's a great way to recognize a huge turning point in our nation's history, to when we truly started to get away from slavery, and obviously it perpetuated much, even still after that, right? For at least I think almost another century. We've seen various forms of slavery, right?
Right. Well, human trafficking is another form of slavery.
Exactly.
So,
right.
There are other aspects of slavery that do continue to this day, but it's not as severe as the slavery that was then.
But again, I think where some people get defensive, and I think where also the narrative also gets lost is that slavery or the proliferation of slavery or the capitalization of slavery was not just done by Euro white citizens of this country. I mean, there were Native American slave owners, there were African American slave owners.
There were African slave owners.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And so when it's. Again, I think it's just par for the course and just how reactive people are to everything nowadays. But I think it goes to show, one of the things we're going to touch on is critical race theory, but, is that there's still so much about our history that isn't taught and isn't fully ever known or just explained, because I find it funny that there's that one show on PBS was like Know Your Roots or something like that, or where they go through somebody's
the genetic
DNA
test.
and then the family tree and all this kind of stuff,
okay.
and I think it was Don I think it was Don Cheadle who found out that his ancestors had been slave owners.
Oh wow.
And so again, that's news to a lot of people, because again, it gets lost in our history, and we like to play good versus evil,
right?
And literally black versus white, and yet in the narrative we forget, that it's such a much more complicated issue, and we're still such a young country that we haven't fully kind of really worked through it.
Well, for me, it goes back to education. So when you hear the word trade, you have to understand that there had to have been a benefit for both sides, right? So when you have people that are coming from Europe into Africa to trade slaves for something else, that is a slave. I mean, that is a trade, right? So you have to give something in order to get something. That's basically what the word trade means, really. So there were already slaves in Africa, and in order for them to get put and brought into America, they had to have received something in return, whether it was money or gold or promises, whatever it was, it still took place. And this is where that education gets lost. Nobody is really taught that. You have to actually go in and look for that information. And I do understand the frustrations with people when they feel like it's more divisive, but it's really not. You're just educating the rest of America about what
it's an
Black Americans
oversimplification
have been
of our history.
Yeah, I mean, Black Americans have been celebrating this for decades, centuries, really. Their own independence from. Their own freedom from slavery, which is, I mean, it's an amazing thing. It's something that should be celebrated. It's something that should be taught properly. The problem is that it's not really taught the way it should be.
I remember Jubilee Day.
Mm-hmm. That's what it was always called.
When I was in private school. So when I started hearing the Juneteenth situation, I was a little confused about it, because I was like, I really don't know what this is. And then like when you look it up on Google, you see the word Jubilee, and I was like, okay, I know exactly what Jubilee is. And so I was a little surprised of that. I was surprised that they didn't do it as a national holiday during the Obama administration.
Right.
And that was him more or less not wanting to be the Black president, which I think a lot of people are now seeing was definitely the way he governed. He didn't want to be the Black president. He didn't want to be that person. He wanted to be a president, which I can commend him for it. But at the end of the day, there were a lot of things that he did miss and misstep on. I don't have an issue with Juneteenth. I think it's something we've been... too far into it. I think that's what's happening. I think people are getting very July 4th.
No.
When has anyone ever said that? I don't think I've ever heard anyone make a comment that Juneteenth is going to replace July 4th, or now we have two different Independence Days. We don't really have two different Independence Days. We celebrate when women got the right to vote. We celebrate when Black people got the right to vote.
Right.
These are celebrations that we have throughout the years.
Yeah, but to that
because
point,
we get to recognize that the growth of this country has always been growing. We are always growing, because at the end of the day, this is an experiment.
Yeah, but to that point, there are people who are saying, well, I'm not going to celebrate the 4th of July. I'm going to celebrate Juneteenth, because, again, they're African American, and they feel that was when they, again, culturally, they were truly given freedom, right? And it's like, and I get it, that, again, this is what people are worried about, that it's going to sow this kind of resentment.
Well, then what's your definition of freedom? Because is your definition that you're allowed to vote? Because if that's the case, then people under the age of, like, I think it was like 25 weren't allowed to vote. Women weren't allowed to vote. People that didn't own land weren't allowed to vote. Like, these are a lot of things. So I mean, you can you can have that conversation and play that game, and like you can play it out to its ending of like, what you're saying makes absolutely no sense and is of itself divisive, and because of that, I'm not game for it.
Well, and what's interesting too is that there's some people who don't want this to be a holiday, or I guess now didn't want this to be a holiday, which I don't also quite understand. But then there are those that are saying, well, you know, the announcement of this becoming a holiday should have come with other programs or legislation that again would undo some of the long-term issues that have plagued the black community and created disparity and that sort of thing. Excuse me, I gotta. Excuse me.
That COVID.
Which again, I think had they done that, that would have taken away. Yeah, been there, done that. Would have taken away from the significance and the importance of the holiday.
Right. Because
then it would have seemed opportunistic. And so, look, I don't think Republicans should take issue with what Biden did in making this a holiday, and in fact should own it and celebrate it.
I think if they are taking issue with it, they really need to have an honest conversation with themselves and ask themselves why they're having an issue with it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Like, you really need to dig down deep and figure out why you have an issue with America celebrating black freedom in America.
Well, and again, Republicans should be the ones, you know, again, during Black History Month, having, you know, a dinner, you know, commemorating, you know, all the black Republicans. Again,
Right.
I mean, there's one that's, you know, become the story, and I don't have his name in front of me, but he was actually during the, you know, the early, the late 1800s. He was a Florida state senator, African American, from the Tampa Bay area, from Tampa, you know, who is part of this lost cemetery that we're talking about just north of our downtown area. And it's like, wow, like that's amazing history that we should be celebrating and we should be putting out front.
This gets me excited because we need to make sure that we are educating our communities properly when it comes to American history. So anything that has happened on this soil is American history, right?
Correct.
Even if it has happened internationally where we were involved, it's still American history. So the problem that we're having is that a lot of the African culture that has come over to America due to slavery has been lost throughout the centuries, and we need to have scholars and people going to find that information and bring it to light, bring it to the world, because we have contributed to so many other things other than just music and movies. We've contributed to Congress, we've contributed to creating laws and being scientists and so many other things, food, culinary, like all kinds of arts and things that of that nature. So to be able to have that connection with your roots from Africa and melding it into American history is, I feel like, would be much more. The morale would be boosted.
And it's
very so divisive.
And it's very American.
Yes.
I mean, as a Hispanic American, I found it very comforting when I watched Into the Heights. It was a very Hispanic, Latino. It's phenomenal. I almost cried. I almost cried, and I enjoyed it so much because it's a play for Hispanics by Hispanics. And when you think about it, like, what other roles on Broadway could Hispanics play? And I'm like, West Side Story, and that's kind of it.
That's it.
And so you're like, okay, so we need more representation, which is fine.
Everyone needs more representation.
And so I don't have an issue. Yeah, and I don't have an issue with having this. And if a Republican has an issue with it, then really a conversation needs to be had for that. You have some Democrats that have the same conversation. Yeah. And at the end of the day, I think more of this should be celebrated in more cultures and more diversity and everything. So it builds into the Republican Party and into the big tent party. That's exactly what we need to keep on doing.
Well, this is where I have a problem with it is when it's forced. Right? Okay. And so you have, let's say, a character, and we're starting to see this in some of our entertainment, which in entertainment, I mean, again, it's fine. I don't care. It's entertainment, right? But just as an example, you know, they're taking, let's say, characters that, in some cases, they're technically aliens, right? Because they're superheroes, you know, but they were white in skin color, you know, and now they're saying, oh, well, Spider-Man, for instance. Well, now we got Miles Morales, you know, who is a black Hispanic, you know, kid who becomes like the 10th or 12th generation Spider-Man, you know. And while I think it's cool, and obviously for the survival of that brand of Spider-Man, you need to find new storylines and new ways to take it, you know. But we see where, again, you know, there's a time and a place for it, you know. And I think Hollywood consistently gets it wrong, you know, because, for instance, when you had like The Last Samurai with Matt Damon.
It's some white actor.
But Matt Damon also did
Don't get crazy now.
Cógelo con tequirisi, okay?
Tequirisi.
We lost half of the audience.
but where
Joe has no idea what we're saying.
When you see corporate America, you know, and the entertainment industry forcibly assimilate, you know, to create diversity where there isn't any, is I think where, again, I think it falls short, right? And like you said, like, yeah, everybody needs more representation, but it needs to be done the proper way and create vehicles for there to be more representation. You know, but getting back to the topic of Juneteenth and Jubilee and so I think it's amazing, like, that, you know, we saw just a couple years ago, we saw a movie about Harriet Tubman, you know, and
phenomenal.
And right, exactly. And we've seen, you know, again, these vehicles to, you know, for there to be more diversity in our films, and that there is so much of our history that we don't know about.
Well, there's so much more than just Harriet Tubman,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
There's so much more. There's
Yeah.
chefs that cooked for George Washington and Thomas Jefferson that were world renowned. Like, that stuff is important to know as well. It's not just, you know, the few that helped with the Underground Railroad, or the few that helped, you know, in different aspects of different things. We need to know the entire history.
Yeah,
and that's important.
And so, you know, and we're going to touch on this again a little bit when we get to our education segment. But there's so much that, yes, that our education about American history needs to be revisited.
Yes.
Because, you know, Black history shouldn't be relegated to February.
No.
Because it's such a huge part of American history. Black history is American history.
Yes.
And the contributions, it's not like Obama trying to, you know, claim that Muslims had made some contribution to NASA and our space program. You know, it's like not some fabrication. You know, like, this is real. Like, there's so much out there that we have no clue about, that is still yet to be learned and understood or fully given its proper place, you know, in terms of our historical education.
I think that's what most people are fighting for, that are more on board with the Juneteenth or Jubilee, is we just need more positive representation of what being African American actually means, because everybody has their own sect. Like, there's, you know, Jewish American or Asian American or Pacific Islander American and Hispanic American. We all have these different cultural things that we can go to and grasp as tangible, but African Americans don't really have that. We have a very negative connotation when it comes to that. So we just need more positive representation in that way, more positive education when it comes to American
Well, and I think,
that's what
but
Hollywood,
again,
but that's what Hollywood always does. Hollywood does the negative.
It's
Hollywood
true.
does the ghetto hoochie mama #2 in its movies,
goodness.
and it's very upsetting. And it's very aggressive sometimes. So then when you see a fictitious, like, Black power, Black enrichment, Black empowerment of Wakanda, and like the craziness that happened with that, you're like, wow, this entire
amazing.
community is lacking in that kind of affirmative representation, and it had to be. And you know what? It was a great movie. Black Panther was an amazing movie,
It was really
and
good.
people took that and they ran with it, and now it's a part of the culture. But you need more of that. You need more Hispanic, Latino. You need more Asian infusion. You need all of that, and I think people are really thinking that you can only do it in certain times of the year.
Look, and
all around.
And I don't know if it's because of its significance or because it was so different from what we've seen for our lifetimes. But to me, like, Black Panther, I wouldn't argue, may be the best Marvel movie that they've made.
It was so good.
I mean, it was. I mean, no, and honestly, maybe second coming to maybe like the end game. You know, like some of the ones that kind of brought all the storylines together. You know, but look, hey, but I felt. I mean, there was just such a different representation and a presentation of of what this kind of Marvel universe can be, that I think they realized, hey, like, if we do this, and look, I mean, kudos to Stan Lee and even the DC universe. Like, you often hear about TV shows like pushing the boundaries of civil rights and diversity and that sort of thing. But the comic books were far ahead, in terms of presenting diversity among their characters. And they've just begun to scratch the surface on some of those things.
You think about it, it's 2021. Like, we should have done this like 10, 20 years ago. Like, why are we doing it now? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, why are we doing this now? It should have been done a long time ago. I'm glad that it's happening now, and like more eyes are on it, and people are more, trying to push that envelope a little bit. But it should have been done a long time ago.
It's so weird how Hollywood goes through these cycles, because when we were younger, we had entire TV shows with black families, with strong black men and strong black women. And you had Hispanic families. And now you don't see, it's starting to come back a little bit. But what happened in the late 90s and early 2000s where it was nothing but kind of whitewashed a little?
Yeah.
And it goes through these cycles.
Those.
Because it's not like we didn't have, because someone's like, well, we've never had a black representation on TV. That's not true.
That's not true.
Don't get me wrong. What was happening in the background with Papa Jello is a whole nother conversation with a Jello pop.
Well, but to that point,
it was great.
Pudding pop.
The pudding pops. But to your point, honestly, what a lot of people don't know is that's part of the reason Dave Chappelle walked away from his show. Because as hysterical and groundbreaking as Chappelle's show was, he also realized that through some of that lens that he was kind of putting on the black community, that he was also reinforcing a lot of negative stereotypes. And his show became such a cultural phenomenon that it kind of crossed over in a way that he hadn't expected, to where he said he was being made uncomfortable about some of his own comedy, some of his own sketches, and again, it just goes back to, well, that's just been the lowest common denominator for so long, that again, people thought it was perfectly acceptable, where again, I don't know that anyone other than maybe Dave Chappelle could even pull something like that off now, with the type of characters that he was presenting.
Now,
definitely not.
I don't think you can do it now.
He would be canceled.
I
mean, preceding that, in Living Color, Living Color was phenomenal. I loved it. It was, it certainly took a back seat. It put SNL in the back seat for me, when they came along, because there was so much diversity and it was fresh and the characters were so original. But again, you look
at... We need to bring that back.
Like there are some great characters in there, but then there's also some that you're like, ooh, like now that it just feels different nowadays, right? It has like a little bit of a different context to it.
Well, I feel like when you continuously perpetuate negativity in the limelight when it comes to media or movies or anything like that, that's what people see.
Right.
Especially people that don't go out into these communities and aren't around black people or Spanish people. They don't really know. They only know what they see on TV.
Yeah.
So when you're constantly seeing the young black girl who's twerking on TV, or there's gang shootings and drug dealers, like that's all you see. That's all you think that the black community is, and we need more positive representation in that way.
Well, and we forget, like there's parts of this, the majority of this country is not diverse.
Right.
I mean, basically, you cut out the entire border all the way around, and everything in that middle is not as diverse as we are here in Tampa Bay or Miami or Atlanta or New York or California. And people aren't exposed to people of other ethnicities and other cultures. And
I would have to push back into that a little bit. Some of the most segregated neighborhoods in the country are in New York and LA. Some very
segregated, yes. But I'm talking about unintentionally, like if you're living like in the middle of Nebraska, there's a good chance you probably never met a black person.
Is it better
or a Hispanic person?
But is it better that it's unintentional, or is that it's intentionally segregated?
No, but what I'm saying is to support her point, which is that sometimes because you live in these parts of the country where there isn't any diversity, the only reference you have, the only exposure you have to any people of color is the media. And so if you're watching Chappelle's show and you see like his crackhead character, or you see, you know, or you're watching SVU and maybe the criminal is a Hispanic guy, you know, again, like these stereotypes are reinforced, you know, and again, these shows have gotten a lot better about it, but it's one of those things where people perceive that to be normal and to be the reality when it's not.
So Hector Gonzalez says the best and has the most comments right now, and it is, we have to adopt the view of the U.S. Army, we are green.
We are green.
So does that mean like lizard people? I don't know what that means.
How about we're just red, white, blue? Like, let's just leave it. These colors don't run, end period. That's it.
Well,
we're all American, because America's an international country. Like, everybody from everywhere comes here.
Yeah, so. Everyone's immigrating here.
Right. You know, what's funny is that, you know, while Chappelle, again, you know, did some amazing work on his show, a lot of people don't realize, like, he grew up in the Midwest, you know, in a predominantly white community. And people think that, you know, he was a New Yorker, you know, and he was a guy from the streets of New York when he really wasn't, you know. And I only say that to mention that, you know, over the weekend in Madison Square Garden's first concert since the pandemic started, Dave Chappelle showed up during the Foo Fighters concert, and he sung a cover of "Creep" by Radiohead.
My God.
To a sold-out audience, which is amazing.
Wow.
And then he also backed me up, saying that Nebraska, Kansas, and Iowa are not as diverse as Florida, Texas, or California.
Right.
You know,
and that's okay, Nebraska.
Okay.
So, again, thank you to everybody for watching The Yard Sign, the most important and relevant podcast in politics. Your host, as always, Johnny Torres, joining me today. Allie Marie Legg, candidate for school board here in Hillsborough County. And, of course, Anibal David Cabrera. We've had some fun with tonight's topics. We were talking about CD13 and Juneteenth. Now we're going to go ahead and get into our educational spotlight. But you're definitely going to want to stick around, as we're also going to cover campaigns and elections, as some Republican groups are experiencing drama based on who they are asking to come and speak to their groups.
What?
And fortunately, I think all three of us are pretty well qualified to speak on that particular topic. But let's first get into an educational spotlight, given that we have Allie with us as our special guest today, who's going to be running for school board. Are you running countywide?
Yes, countywide.
Okay.
So anybody in Hillsborough County can vote for Allie Marie Legg.
There we go. I love it. And so let's go ahead first, before getting into the topic. Let's get into a bit of your background. So, you know, kind of give us the elevator pitch. What do we want to know about you?
Well, first, I'm a veteran, a military veteran. I'm a wife, and I'm a mother of
Awesome.
5 kids. Me and my husband have been married for 10 years. We have 5 kids together.
Thank you for your service, by the way.
Thank you. It's
Both as a veteran and as a mother.
It's hard work. It is. So our age range is.
I'm guessing motherhood is probably harder than the military.
I don't know.
Oh, okay. All right. Wow.
I will refrain from comment.
No comment on that one.
No comment. But yeah, so our oldest is 13, 11, 7, 5, and 3. Our youngest, she'll be 3 on Wednesday. So.
Awesome. That's amazing.
And I guess, you know, not every teacher is a parent, but every parent is a teacher.
Sure.
And I got into this because the last few years, when I say 3 or 4 years, I've been working with other personal health freedom groups around Florida. And nationally, trying to preserve our parental rights and medical privacy, and making sure that there wasn't government overreach trying to strip those rights away. And during the lockdowns, we decided that a few of us moms got together and we put on a reopen rally for Tampa, and we had about 400 people show up to that. And after that, we were like, wait a minute, candidates and elections, and we need a constitutional sheriff, and we need to vet everybody. And we started that process, and that's how Moms for Freedom came about. And that's how I realized that there was a need for people like me that were constitutional candidates to sit in these seats and provide a different perspective. And our children are our future of America. And if they're not educated properly on America's foundations, and properly to go out into our communities and give back and be self-motivated and, you know, free thinkers, everybody suffers.
Sure.
So I was like,
yeah,
I'll sit that seat. I'll do that.
You know, and that's so important, you know, because oftentimes, you know, you find people that want to run for office because they're just fired up about what they heard on Fox News, right?
Right.
You know, and to me, like, that's not a reason to run for office. There needs to be something tangible that you want to change.
Right.
There needs to be something that is truly motivating. Even if, like, the first campaign I ever volunteered on was for a gentleman by the name of Trey Stroud, who did not win the primary, but he was motivated by autism. His son was autistic,
Yep.
and he wanted to go to Tallahassee and make some fundamental changes as to how children and even adults, who have autism are treated in the state,
Yep.
and some of the opportunities or lack thereof and resources, and to me, that's why you run for office. Not because you think there's some big boogeyman,
Right.
And we've had candidates who, have run and they're like, oh, well, we're worried about Muslim indoctrination and that sort of stuff. It's like, that's not reality, okay? And I get Fox News is telling you differently, but the truth of the matter, there's so many, and the list of problems in our school district, that isn't even
so
on the
vast.
first page.
No.
And
not.
so let's talk about the real problems that are facing this district. And look, to your credit, Anibal has been singing the praises of the parents who stood up and really took the school board to task, and even unseating many of them in this last
Yep.
election over the way that they mishandled the reopening of our schools.
Yes.
What was that kind of the moment that the light bulb went off for you?
I think so. Well, first, we have a special needs child. He's high functioning autistic. So when the lockdown started and they decided to close the schools, he had to sit in Zoom class for hours at a time, and him not being able to sit still and function, and it was it was just way too much. Listen.
I'm not on camera, Jonathan.
No, it was just way too much for him, and being a parent, you are your child's advocate, and if you don't advocate for your kids, no one else is going to.
Right.
So that was why I decided to get into this, because our kids matter.
No,
and
look,
parental rights are so important,
Right.
and if we don't stand up to the bureaucracy that's happening right now, it's just going to continue to get worse.
Yeah. Well, we often look at the schools that are underperforming, the kids that are underperforming, and oftentimes it's because the parents aren't advocating for their children, and unfortunately, I think that more and more so that has become the case where because now you have a two-parent working household.
Yes.
They don't have the time to spend at the schools. They don't have the time to volunteer. They don't know what's going on in those schools because they don't have that relationship with the teacher, or they don't have the time to build that relationship with the teacher, or to see it for themselves.
Right.
I mean, I was incredibly fortunate where my mom was able to stay at home for most of my early schooling, to the extent that not only did she volunteer, I mean, she would work in the cafeteria, she would
wow.
volunteer in the classroom, like she was a presence. And so if there had been something wrong in my school, I can guarantee you she would have been, one of the first people to bring attention to it. And because of those same factors, the children and the schools, more so, that need the most advocacy are the ones that get the least of it.
Right. And you need to have a school board member that is going to take that into consideration when it comes time to voting for things. We have to make sure that the people that are sitting on the board are being held accountable for the decisions that they're making for the county and for their districts and for the people that are in those districts. And there's, to your point of having less involvement of parents in these struggling schools, none of that information that is going out into the schools, that the curriculum or whatever they're doing teaching these kids, is not going home either.
Right.
So at least if it was going home, there's an opportunity for a parent to look at it and say, okay, this is cool or this is not okay.
Yeah.
And for them to step up and make a choice or do something about it. But because that's not happening, there's a lapse in responsibility.
And I kind of want to go into the some of the different issues that we're having both here locally and nationally with you. But the other thing is too that I think parents sometimes forget is that kids don't know whether what they're being exposed to is right or wrong.
Absolutely.
And so, for instance, the air conditioning issue, which we were talking about before the show started, they don't know that that's not supposed to be normal. They don't know that they're supposed to have a comfortable environment in which to study. They don't know that a funny gas smell in the classroom is not acceptable and could be hazardous to your health. And so they're not going to run home and say, oh, Mom, hey, the AC wasn't working today, or there was this funny smell coming into the classroom, because they don't know anything else. They don't have any other reference. And so oftentimes, again, in these schools, that don't get the resources or the attention that they need, again, that's where the kids suffer the most, especially when those parents just don't have the bandwidth or the resources
Right.
to be able to advocate for their children in the way that they should.
Well, that brings question to what has the administration done? What has our school board done? What are our teachers doing to correct those situations when we've had 39 struggling schools for the last 10 years? So what is everybody doing?
Right.
And our budget is $3.3 million, and you're telling me that you can't figure out how to fix these problems that are essential for these kids? I mean, it's borderline abuse. You have children in classes that are sweating. There's no air conditioning in 103-degree weather outside here in Florida. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It would be cooler for them to do homework and studying outside than it would be inside with the conditions that they're under. And it's completely unacceptable. And there needs to be accountability for that.
Well, the worst part is that these classrooms that do have malfunctioning air conditioning systems are now being forced to keep their doors and windows closed for safety reasons, right? Because of Parkland and other school shootings and that sort of thing. And so now a teacher can't open the windows and she can't open the doors. And so, again, how does a kid even properly learn an environment like that when they are uncomfortable? And then the teachers are finding it harder to teach them because the kids are uncomfortable and they're going to fidget and stand up and want to walk around and they're
not getting fresh air. I mean, it's almost like it's an institution instead of a schoolhouse, like how it used to be. You know what I mean? It should be imperative that these children are able to get fresh air, and that their recess isn't held hostage because of the behavior of everybody else in the classroom. I mean, this stuff is just. There's so much wrong with our school systems right now. It would take us a long time to go through.
And you don't hear that much about it when it comes to the suburb schools.
Right.
You hear a little bit about it when it comes to inner city schools and schools that are on the peripheral of what's going on. But those are schools that have their parents very plugged into what's happening. Those are the schools that have the kids focused on what's going on. And not to say that the inner city schools don't, but someone needs to be talking about them. Someone needs to be on the council talking about when the pandemic hit. No one thought about the thousands of kids that were going to go hungry because they rely on food every single week from the school system. No one thought about that. Who thought about that? My wife thought about that. You thought about that.
I thought about that.
Other people in this room that are teachers thought about it. That was the first thing in their mind.
That and abusive homes.
And it took them almost 2 weeks, 3 weeks to get it in order. And you're like, ridiculous. How on earth is a school board not knowing these things? When one, that means they're too far away and they're not noticing what's happening, or they're not plugged into the community. Because I'll tell you right now, the first day that my wife had to come home because of the whole COVID situation, my first thought is, where are these kids going to get food?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Who's going to protect these kids? Because I'll tell you right now, the majority of people, when they said the number of kids reports of abusive children has gone down, in my mind, I was like, it's because no one is there to report it. No one is seeing that Billy has a bruise in the back. No one's reporting that Emily has a broken arm. No one's seeing these things that's happening. And it hurts to even talk about it because there is a subsection within our community that these kids don't have stable homes. These kids are living in motels and because of their parents' situation.
Or on the street, or in group homes. And and the way they could have saved all of this money and could have saved the strife that these kids are now experiencing is by leaving it up to choice. Those teachers that were too afraid to come to work could have taught at home. Those kids whose parents were too afraid to send their kids to brick and mortar, they could have stayed at home and done was online.
So you're in favor of the hybrid model?
Well, not hybrid, but because hybrid was too much on our teachers. It was hard for our teachers to be one
I'm in
teacher.
hybrid in the sense that, again, some would be at home, some would be
at home. That would have saved a whole lot of trouble, a whole lot of money, a whole lot of mental, emotional abuse, like stress and abuse and things of that nature, if it would have just been left up to choice.
Yeah, and actually Devin, our good friend Devin Alexander, who's in the comments section, makes a great point which is actually a topic that's being discussed here in Hillsborough, is whether or not the superintendent of schools should be elected or chosen by the school board. Currently, it's chosen by the school board
Right.
here in Hillsborough County, but in many counties, I believe, including the one that our current superintendent came from, it's an elected position. And so I don't know if anyone's brought that question to you before, but any kind of thoughts preliminarily on whether a superintendent should be elected or chosen by the school board?
I think the chosen part of this, of having the school board choose a superintendent, I think it would depend on the school board. Because I know that the reason why he was hired in the first place was to help fix the 39 struggling schools, because he has a track record of doing that.
Okay.
However, when he was hired, the week he was hired was the week we closed.
Yeah.
And then all of those mandated
Unforeseen costs.
unforeseen costs
yeah.
happened, and
Right.
which trying to make sure that all the kids that didn't have Wi-Fi had Wi-Fi or laptops and internet and things like that. That was implemented. So
Yeah.
he wasn't able to do the job he was hired on for, and that's never ever happened in the history of
Sure.
ever. So
Yeah.
I mean,
it's
a
been over a
problem.
century since our last pandemic.
Absolutely,
So,
but
right.
when it comes to elections with school board, we already have an issue with parents previously or people previously not paying attention to school board elections. However, I feel like 2020 was a blessing and a curse at the same time, because one, COVID, but also it has shed the light on so much corruption that is happening and so much overreach that's happening in our schools, that now more parents or more people, more taxpayers are paying attention. They've realized that there's a lot of things that are wrong with our schools.
Yeah.
Well, and to that point, so there are some things that we know is wrong with the superintendent. One of them being, this company that has been brought on as a vendor to provide, is it software, curriculum, that his brother.
It was Achieve 3000, I believe it was, a reading.
And his brother-in-law.
It was his brother-in-law.
Right, and his
yeah.
brother-in-law is the president of. So obviously conflict of interest.
Right.
And millions of dollars at stake here for this contract. And so what's kind of your opinion on that?
Well, I think he should have done a little bit more research on, even not just him though, but the school board should have
Right.
done
I mean,
a little bit
I don't
more
think the school board should have
diligent
allowed it. I
research.
think that conflict of interest should
Absolutely.
have canceled that immediately.
Even before the contract was signed.
Sure.
We need more oversight. There's
Yeah.
a problem. We don't have enough oversight. We have all these committees that do all these things. Nothing really comes out of these committees because the board is still able to make their decisions based on whatever information they have at the time. But there's no one actually sitting down and doing the research themselves.
Well, and in my opinion, oftentimes these committees are simply a way to take, the troublemakers or the
Yes.
noisemakers
Yes.
and give them something to do. So they
Access.
feel that they're, access, but also so you can say, okay, go run along and that way, like you said, feel like you're doing something about
Right.
whatever it is that you care about, but in reality, it having zero impact on the school board at
Right.
large.
I feel that we should look at every contract
Yes.
and go through it
Yes.
over again. I really was hoping that the school board was going to go into receivership. And the only reason why I wanted to do that, because it restarts all the contracts. Every contract has to be rebid, every contract has to be reviewed to see if that's the actual most beneficial, cost-effective contract for the school. From vendors to software to the financial reporting to scheduling. Some of these contracts that you see that's going through, you're like, you're paying $4 million, $1 million more than the other person that was willing to do the program, and a company from Canada, or like what? It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense. And you're like, how on earth did this get through? And now you're like, well, how do we get rid of it?
Right.
And that's what we should do.
And Allie, I think it might have been you when we kind of maybe first connected on Facebook, but I did see it somewhere where there's millions of dollars that are literally a light item in the budget as miscellaneous expenses. And so again, really, and maybe this is. Let me just kind of make it a broader question. What is going to be your priority going into the school board if you're given the chance to, if you're elected?
There's
And I know there's a lot.
There's just
but-
so much.
But is it budget? Is it curriculum? Is it where do you feel the urgency needs to be placed? When you come in day one.
So day one, I feel like personally, knowing the information that I know, so if everybody understands that 96% of our budget goes to payroll and administration, that's a problem.
Right.
We have a $3.3 million
Billion.
Billion dollar. It's $1 billion budget. We're the 7th largest district in America, and we have $3.3 billion budget. Okay. And 96% of that goes to administration and payroll. That is a problem.
Well, and that actually gets to a point that I wanted to bring up too, which is, I have a lot of amazing teachers in my universe, right? And the one thing that I hear consistently from what?
You better say that.
Yeah, and one of the things that I hear consistently from them is that there is a lot of bloated middle management. So they're not in the classroom.
That's what I'm hearing also.
They're not even in the school.
Yep.
But they're somewhere between the school board and the school itself.
Right. So it needs to be right-sided. And I feel like that is what Addison Davis is trying to do. However, there's a little pushback with that.
Well, what I've heard is that these are all people he brought.
He's getting rid of, I feel like, the wrong people.
Well, yeah.
He needs to
what I've heard is that
he's getting rid of people and he's bringing people on.
Yeah, but that's the thing.
It doesn't make any sense. So I don't agree with that.
And I don't know what the number is, but I heard that a lot of these middle management people were people that he brought from Duval. And that oftentimes these are people who aren't even qualified to be in the roles that they're supposed to be in.
Is what they're getting.
Yeah, they're getting 6 figures. A lot of them have no classroom experience, and aren't even in the positions to advise the people that they're supposed to be advising in these roles. And so for you, sorry, because I kind of stole your answer. I mean,
fine.
Is it the budget? I mean, is it?
The budget is definitely a major issue.
Yeah.
Right-sizing that and making sure that they interface properly, because we have schools that have. You have a school with a principal that has a certain amount of units, so a certain amount of positions to fill, and they're not told a number. They're like a salary. They're not told the amount that they are able to spend per position. So you can fill 6 positions with people that make $45,000 a year or $35,000 a year, and that makes a difference in what the county is spending.
Yeah.
And that needs to interface. It doesn't need to be units. It needs to be dollar numbers.
Right.
And that's another issue. So that I would hope bringing that to the board's attention would try to fix that problem. Now, there are other issues like curriculum. Now, we know that Governor DeSantis has banned CRT, but that doesn't mean that it won't seep in somehow.
Sure.
It is a very dangerous curriculum. There's explicit content when it comes to that curriculum as well.
And could you just expand a little bit on your understanding as to what CRT is?
So my understanding of CRT is intentionally divisive.
In critical race theory.
Yes, critical race theory, for those that don't know what CRT is. It's critical race theory, and it's based on theory. Theory is in the actual title of the curriculum, which is a problem. It's not proven. Right. It's an experiment. And what it is doing is saying that light skin are the oppressors and dark skin are the oppressed. And it's teaching our children to hate each other. I come from a very multi-colored family, if you put it that way. My mother is very light-skinned Latina. My father is a darker-skinned Latino, but he has African and Irish heritage. So when you put us together, my brother looks like my mom skin color-wise, and I look like my dad skin color-wise.
Right.
Okay? If we're in a classroom together, and we're told whites are oppressors, and blacks are oppressed, what is that doing to the mental, emotional well-being of our kids? Yeah. What does that seep into in our communities? That's a problem.
Right.
And that goes back to failing from teaching. Our schools have failed our students and our communities by teaching them things, not teaching American history properly. When we teach the Constitution, we teach our founders' framework and their thought process on how the Constitution came about. That is where you find that they intentionally put men and women are free.
Yeah.
That's important to know.
Sure, right. So, well, and that's where I say, that we do need to revisit the way American history is taught. Because I think it's okay to say that Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, James Madison, they weren't perfect people, okay? Yes, did they write this document and say, that, hey, everyone is created equal and all? Did they have the right intentions? Absolutely. Were they also slave owners?
Yes.
Did they also have, inappropriate relationships with some of the slaves that they owned in case of Thomas Jefferson, and absolutely, those things need to be taught, and I think that's important information to have.
But we need
because it's also important to understand how complex of an issue the birth of this nation really was, and how complicated it must have been to bring about the emancipation of slavery.
Right. We needed to get away from Britain first before we could attack what was happening in America.
Yeah.
Because if there was no America, we would all just be under British rule.
Well, yeah,
it took years for us, it took centuries sometimes, for us to get to where we needed to be as a people,
Right.
as a society, as a way of thinking. And even then, in the future, we're probably going to change and think differently and move into different situations.
We need to continue to move forward.
There'll
We can't go back.
There'll be different revolutions and different thought patterns. But as long as the republic stays the way it is, for the firm and bringing people onto the homeland, I think we'll be good as a nation,
Yes.
as a people. Again, our families 2 generations ago would have never thought this is possible.
Right.
That we would be able to do this, we'd be on the internet, that we would be having our own property here, that we'd be having our own businesses, raising our own families.
Yeah.
That was a dream for our grandparents. And to see how a generation, 2 generations, 5 generations from now, what our kids will be, what our nieces and nephews will be, is fascinating. And I feel that a lot of people are forgetting that. I hate when people say that the American dream is dead. Because the American dream ain't dead for me.
It's not.
It's not dead for you. It's not dead for you. We live it every single day. And to see,
but it's not given to you. You know
No,
what I
it was
mean?
never
And
given
that's
to us.
and that's what people. That's where I think a lot of people misunderstand or like to bend the conversation. You know, it's that. Just because you're born in this country doesn't mean that you're given the American dream.
Right. Correct.
You have to
still
work
have to work for it. And that's
you have to earn it.
Yeah.
CRT is basically telling people that black people and people of color do not have the same opportunities as white people. And that is not true. It's not true.
Right.
Because if it was true, we wouldn't have had Barack Obama as a president
Correct.
for 2 terms.
it's a regression. It's a
Yeah.
We
regression.
wouldn't have a black Congress.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have black politicians. We wouldn't have black doctors. We wouldn't
Right.
have, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You have to want it. You have to work for it.
Yeah.
There are obstacles in the way,
Correct.
but we are a very young nation, and the more we progress and we move forward with forward thinking and being free thinking and being problem solvers, the solutionary, that's how we fix and bring America forward. But if we're still teaching children segregation, it's segregation in 2021.
Correct,
It
yeah.
doesn't make any sense. We're moving backwards, and we can't do that.
Well, the problem too is that, you know, so obviously, you know, like I said, sometimes good legislation, you know, is, you know, comes with, you know, bad outcomes. You know what I mean? Because, you know, we look at programs that, and now I'm forgetting, well, equal opportunity programs, right? And to the extent that now they've gone so far in the other direction, you know, like now, you know, it's like Harvard, for instance, is having a problem because they think they have too many Asians coming
Asian
into,
females, yeah.
you know, too many Asians coming into the university. And so now they're limiting the number of Asians that can come into the community. And they're literally exacerbating this racial problem, right? And to me, they're also perpetuating a lot of the stereotypes and a lot of the issues, because the problem is again, getting back to the root of the problem is our school systems.
Yes.
You know, and so, you know, when you talk about, oh, well, you're Hispanic, so you only have to get this score, which is lower than if you were white. You know, the white scores are at a higher point for you to get into this university. And if you're African American, well, then you can get in with an even lower score, you know, because, you know, again, you know, they're perpetuating all of this victimization or this
Right.
victimhood. And again, they're perpetuating the problems that are actually starting at the most local level, which is our schools. And they're saying that, you know, again, you know, even though we were in the same school system, you know, that somehow you were at a disadvantage simply because of the color of your skin. And so we got to lower the bar for you because you're obviously not as smart as the white kids.
How dare you,
know,
is what
it's-
I say to
right.
that. How dare you? How dare
Yeah.
you say that because I am a different skin color than somebody else, that I have less opportunity, or I'm not smart enough, or I can't do this, or I can't
Right.
do that. That's self-limiting. And I always tell my kids, you can do anything you put your mind to
Right.
without limitations. And that it's American excellence. That's what we need to start supporting. That's what we need to start telling our children and educating the kids in our communities, because when you teach them that they cannot do something, that is going to be their mentality.
Right.
But if you constantly feed them positive reinforcement, like, I know that this is hard, but just keep trying, keep doing it. You will find a way to figure it out. I promise you'll do it. They do it.
Well, and that's the thing, we've seen people of all ethnicities really rise to
Yes.
the highest positions of power and education and celebrity and success.
Yep.
And really more so, I would say, in this country than maybe any other.
Yes.
And so I find it so hypocritical when you look at somebody like, LeBron James, who's obviously, considering himself as now, a leader in the Black Civil Rights movement, but here's someone who,
Listen,
here's someone who benefits
with his house in Bel Air.
Oh my
Come
God.
on.
Well,
He's
he-
like the most privileged Black American in America. Like,
What other
telling
country
everyone
would-
how oppressed he is? I don't
Right.
think so.
Well, in what other country would he have had the success that he has had with a high school education? Because let's remember, he didn't go to
Yeah.
college. He went directly into the MBA from high school. Okay, and that is no reflection on his intelligence, because he's an incredibly smart guy. He's obviously been incredibly successful, because now he's even branched out beyond athletics, right? Space Jam, for instance. I mean, that alone. His production company.
Let's let that hit first.
No,
Did you watching it?
But his production company.
I would hold off and saying positive things.
No, but his production company has funded a lot of amazing projects out there and movies and different things. But again, what other country would someone with a high school education have that opportunity? And then not to even go down that tangent, but the hypocrisy of him, talking about oppression here in the United States while taking money from China, who is
literally committing genocide.
Yes.
Genocide
Literally.
and slavery.
And
Yes.
slavery.
Yeah.
And that, I think you're right.
Concentration camps and all of that.
You're going in the right direction, and we're all going in the right direction. But and Devin made this comment. It all starts locally. It
Yes.
all is about,
Right.
and people forget this. They don't think, it's the BOCC or it's your house rep, or no, it's your school board. Your
Right.
school board is touching your. This sounds horrible. It's touching your kids every single day, education-wise.
Yeah.
And because of that, you have to be very on top of what's happening, and which is why I'm really happy that you're running
Oh, thank you.
and very supportive, because I truly feel that if you get people in those positions and in those departments and watching over what's being taught.
Yes.
Because even the governor said, yes, we can say no to whatever, critical race theory, but it's going to other people are going to find ways to
Yeah,
get out of it.
sure.
And the reason why we have such big problems education-wise is because they allow this to fester. They allow
Right.
the racism to fester. And for people to say, well, because we think now all black people can think, or black children can think and do what white kids can do, well, then let's lower the requirements for all the students. And that's when you have a LA County with a 30% reading average. It's absolutely horrible. Or like a 40% graduation rate. I think I'm being very generous when it comes to LA.
You're giving out Hillsborough County numbers.
Oh my gosh. I don't know if they're that bad. But it gets to that point because no one is putting in check what these school boards are doing and just letting them run them up because, it's the school board. They have no real power. They have a lot of
have all the power.
Well, and in some of these liberal cities, all these school boards do is just pacify the union.
Yep.
So
Which
they
is a
don't.
problem.
So
I'm
they
sorry,
don't
I didn't vote for the union.
Well, so they don't
The
get voted out of
union
office, and that's it.
conversation.
All they care is to pacify the union. And look, fortunately, I would say here in Florida, the union has some influence. And I think to an extent it serves a purpose. And they have been helpful, to some of the teachers, that I know. But honestly, when you look at also some of the things that are lacking in terms of support and resources for some of these teachers, like, what have you been doing all these years? The fact is, because my daughter's mother is a teacher, and the fact that she didn't have a leave. She didn't have a leave of absence after her pregnancy. It's like this is an industry
That is awful.
dominated
Dominated
by
by
women,
Wow.
where 90% of its
I don't-
employees are
I don't
women.
understand.
How does
I
the
don't
teachers
understand.
union not advocate
I don't
for
understand.
parental leave
What?
following a pregnancy?
I'm going to say this right now. The wife and I have been talking about having kids, and like every time she talks to me about the way their parental requirements and how many days they get, I'm like, isn't your industry like 90% women? How on earth have that not been brought up?
Right.
It's absolutely, I find it very
Nothing
fascinating.
comes out of this. I hope that we can encourage someone to fix that because that is a major issue.
Yeah.
That is a problem.
Huge issue. Not only that, it's a huge, if you fix it, it's a huge bonus, and I think it would be a huge draw to retain teachers.
Correct.
Yes.
Because honestly, it's in that time when they start to reevaluate, well, is this a profession I want to continue in?
If our
Is
military
this-
members can get 6 months of leave,
Right.
why can't our teachers get 6 months of leave?
Sure.
They're
Yeah.
teaching our children.
Right.
Our future.
Yeah, and look, and I'm not even one of those that say, hey, the husband and the wife should have it. I think maybe, half that time.
Right, or offset.
or something like that, but I think, yeah, to a certain extent, should a father in that situation also have parental leave time? Absolutely. But again, in an industry dominated by women, how does this, and so I don't want to continue to go down that tangent, but it shows you the shortcomings of the teachers union.
Right. What have they really been doing?
Right. It's other than
Politically
continue
strong-arming
to
our school board?
Right, strong arming the school board and the teachers,
Yeah.
into becoming members, and then it seems like the only thing they fight for is more money.
Right.
Well, money is not always the solution.
You can't
know?
have a problem and throw money in it. You have to actually be solutionary.
Something else, the reason why I wanted us to go down that rabbit hole of going into a solvency was the fact that would have canceled the contracts with the unions.
Yeah.
And then you would have to have teachers who had to physically write a check and send it into the unions instead of it just getting swept out of their bank accounts
Right.
every month. That is a huge indication of how many people are actually willing to pay
Right.
the teachers union if it wasn't happening on an automatic deduction. I think the teachers unions have way too much power.
Yes.
And we saw that in the pandemic, how much power they really had, how much influence, and how much willingness they did not care about the kids.
Yep.
They did not care about the kids. They only cared about their constituents, which aren't the children, which is phenomenal that we allow this third-party system because our kids can't vote.
Who are unelected, by the way.
Exactly.
All right, so I didn't realize we've been now at 75 minutes, and so I do want to get into our last topic here. But one more time, so you're running for school board here in Hillsborough
Yes.
County. Of course, they don't have to be in Hillsborough County to support your campaign.
No, anybody,
They
anywhere.
can go ahead and visit your website. Go ahead and give them your
It's
website.
votealliemarielegg.com. Legg, Legge.
And then you're at Allie Marie on most of the social
Yes.
media platforms.
And it's ALY.
So,
yeah,
right,
ALY.
ALY. And we have it up on the screen, but,
We'll add the link to donate.
Oh,
That's
thank
right.
you. Yes, please donate. Donate.
Exactly.
Fill out petitions. You can print them out.
Our last one is, and this is going to be kind of maybe an eye-opening topic for you, being that you're a first-time candidate, kind of being thrust into the next level of political involvement from community activism now into being a candidate. But we're going to talk about campaigns and elections. Again, thank you for watching The Yard Sign, the most important and relevant podcast in politics. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the audio version of our podcast over at just about all the podcast platforms, Google, Apple, Spotify, Audible, and Amazon, and also iHeartRadio. So just search for The Yard Sign, and you'll be able to subscribe and download all of our episodes there.
He's so smooth. He's so smooth when he does that. It's so good.
Thank you. Well, it's years of training.
Years.
The last one is being campaigns and elections, and it's an oversimplification of a topic of an issue that's come up, which is that there's local Republican groups have scheduled certain elected officials and certain campaign consultants to speak at their meetings. Now, I know the one big no-no, which I've personally violated myself, is to have Democrats come and speak at a Republican a Republican-centric organization, okay? So as president of Young Republicans, we often had the mayor, the sitting mayor, or a sitting city council member come to speak to the group. Now, the line that I drew was that they weren't candidates. These were elected officials that happened to be Democrats. Okay, because we're constituents.
Right.
And in this case, it's a little more complex than that. Okay, because some people are taking issue with certain consultants and certain elected officials, even though they wear the Republican badge. And this goes back to, I think, the root of a lot of the problems that we're having here as Republicans in Hillsborough County, which is that there are people who feel that there's some purity test that you have to pass that somebody's giving out there before you are allowed to speak as a Republican in front of a Republican organization. And so, and I don't want to get into naming specific names because it's only going to exacerbate the problem that's currently happening, but what a lot of people don't understand about the political process, and jump in here whenever you want, Anibal, is that candidates, like yourself, are sometimes in a nonpartisan races.
Right.
Okay. Now that being said, you can make the argument that all races are partisan. Great, but technically, on paper, on a ballot,
Yes.
there are nonpartisan races. Okay. Now these consultants, okay, that is their livelihood. That is their career. That is their craft, is to help people get elected into office. And so there are times where, because again, not everybody, again, is going to be in the party that you want them to be in. Now, you're going to side in some of these nonpartisan races with the person that most closely aligns with your beliefs.
Right.
But being a political consultant, and I'm not, by the way, I'm not a political consultant by any means, but again, I'm close enough to a lot of them. Well, I consult in a casual sense. I don't charge for my consulting.
I didn't say anything.
I know.
Did I
Anibal
say
giving me
anything?
faces over here.
I say a thing. I'll turn around.
But for instance, if this is your livelihood and this is how you feed your family, then the issue becomes at a certain point, do you go into some of these nonpartisan races where in some cases Republicans won't even go, like a city council race. It's a nonpartisan race.
Right.
How many Republicans run in these nonpartisan city council races here in Tampa? Zero.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
And that's less than St. Petersburg,
Yeah.
which is far more liberal than we are here in Tampa.
Then you get what happened in 2020 happens. So
And so the problem is that people like to go out there and pick and choose their favorite consultants and then completely try to destroy the reputation of the other because they've represented so-and-so and that person is a Democrat but happened to run in a nonpartisan race. And so now there's a group of people out there who are actively trying to stop Republicans from speaking in Republican events simply because maybe they've represented some Democrats in nonpartisan races, or in some cases Republicans that didn't live up to the purity test, and so the example is that in this particular case of this consultant and this elected official, because they're both scheduled to speak at an event, this elected official is a Republican, former county commissioner, as a Republican. But because she doesn't pass the purity test, now they've sought out the opportunity to go out and vilify the group, bash the group, bash the speakers,
Harass
them,
the leadership,
to try to get them to cancel these two individuals from speaking at that event. When again, we're Republicans. Do you think Democrats are stopping other Democrats from speaking at their events?
no, they are a well-oiled machine.
No,
they fall in line.
No, they don't have events.
Well, there's that, and they fall in line. The truth is that they fall in line, and they circle the wagons. Whereas here, and I'm going to throw them in there. The Hillsborough County Republican Party, being the root of this problem, likes to have this purity test that doesn't exist, and they want to dictate who is and who isn't Republican enough for them. And so then you go out there, and then that's where you start to have issues in these races, because now you have people that will go out there and actively campaign against Republicans simply because they don't pass the muster of whatever this purity test they have in their head.
I think a lot of people continue to forget we're in Hillsborough County. Hillsborough County is a very purple county.
Yes.
We've had almost, in the last 3 or 4 cycles, it's been nothing but county-wide Democrats winning in Hillsborough County, with the lone difference of Chad Chronister, which that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day. But I think what people are forgetting is that we have to, as Republicans, cannot live and die off of the purity test. The fact that because you have to check all 10 boxes, that's the only way that you can be reflected as a Republican. That's just not how that's going to run in Hillsborough County, when Republicans are less than the Democrats in Hillsborough County, and independents. You have to be willing to open that broader conversation to be able to pull Democrats, pull independents and get your Republican base. And I think a lot of people forget that that's how this works. I was in a conversation on Facebook because, I don't know, I wanted to feel pain or something going back and forth on the thread, and they truly said, because of this one person speaking, that's why Republicans are losing in Hillsborough County. I'm like, really? No. That's why Republicans are losing in Hillsborough County? Or is it because we don't have enough Republicans voting in Hillsborough County?
Yeah.
That's the reason why we're losing, and we're not focusing on getting Republicans, we're not focusing on registering Republicans. And how, Johnny, how do people get elected in election cycles?
Having people vote for them.
Having people vote for them.
Right.
So if you have less Republicans and more Democrats, who's going to win every single time, Jonathan?
Right, the Democrats.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This isn't science. This is science.
It's science. But
No,
it's
and
not
look,
rocket
It's
science.
not rocket science.
No,
It is science.
And even in a county where we are severely outnumbered in terms of voter registration, the
I
truth
think
of the
almost
matter
like
is
70,000 now.
yeah, the truth
that's
of the
a
matter
lot.
is that typically we turn out higher
Yes.
than the Democrats do. So if Republicans actually voted for Republicans and supported them, regardless of where on the purity scale they landed, we'd actually win a lot more elections.
The problem that I'm noticing is that the Democrats are getting DNC funding, and Republicans that are running locally aren't getting funding.
Oh, local
That-
aren't getting anything.
But that varies. That varies
Right.
on the candidate. That varies on the race. That varies. I can
Well,
guarantee.
last cycle, it was like almost every candidate?
I think the average
For Dems
donation for
got-
them was like 20,000.
Yeah.
It was a really, it was
Well,
a
the local
spark.
county party has really, I mean,
Yes.
they used to be a disaster, and they've really gotten their act together and become a fundraising powerhouse, you know, and that actually leads me to another point, which is that this particular campaign consultant who has this issue right
will not
now
be named.
is close friends with a top Democrat political fundraiser. Yes, they're on opposite sides of the political aisle. Yes, they hang out. Yes, they are friends. That doesn't mean that he's a
Right.
horrible person or that he's actively working against Republicans.
We're all just people.
You know, and the thing is that you end up on all the same events. You end up at all the same meetings. You end up at all, because the political process just creates that environment. And so, yeah, you know, I mean, you can have political differences on issues, but that doesn't mean that you can't get along
Right.
and have a drink or celebrate someone's birthday or
Right.
whatever the issue is. And so I don't think that that's, again, a proper way to test someone's purity, because again, you know, your friends aren't going to change who you are.
No.
You know, and if you are, then that's not who you were in the first
Right.
place.
They're turning these people into boogeymen. Really, they're
Yeah.
trying to find a scapegoat of the reason why Republicans are not winning in Hillsborough County. And I'll easily tell you why we're not winning in Hillsborough County, because we don't have enough Republican voters.
Right.
But that's not because of one or two, maybe not even three people in the county. It's a collectiveness
Yeah.
of not focusing on getting Republicans elected. Getting Republicans elected.
Well, and that's the
how
thing.
this works.
Like, you look at the St. Petersburg City Council, and you have to scratch your head and wonder, how do they have two Republicans on their city council, being that they are so liberal? Because St. Petersburg is as liberal as they
Yeah.
come.
Right.
And the truth is that Pinellas County Republicans have understood that, hey, this guy may not be the most conservative egg in the basket, but he's as conservative as we're going to get, that is also electable, you
Right.
know, to be able to sit in a very liberal city council.
Right.
And so they accept that fact, and that's why they get elected. You know, and I can tell you that if Ed Montanari, for example, was to run for higher office, he's as Republican as they come. But he also understands his constituency and realizes that he needs to be a little bit more understanding and moderate into what he vote and how he votes, you know, to truly represent his district.
Right.
That doesn't mean he's not a Republican. It doesn't mean he's not a conservative. You know, but again, it's not not every Republican has a specific shoe size. You
Right.
know what I mean? We need to be flexible and be competitive in all races.
Elected public servants, as I like to call them, officials carries too much weight sometimes. Elected public servants, I feel, need to make sure that they are speaking for the entire community or the entire district that they're in.
Yeah.
It can't just be for the Republican Party or for the Democrat Party. It
Correct.
has to be a collective, because our communities aren't just Republican. They're not just
Right.
Democrat. They
Yeah.
are a blend of all of the parties.
Yeah. Well,
So-
and it's not even, again, it's sometimes it's not even on the issues that you would think.
Right.
One of the most conservative congressmen that I know, or former congressman that I know, is actually an advocate for the medical use of marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and Bible thumping, conservative as
Right.
they come. You know why? Because he had a personal experience with that issue,
Mm-hmm.
and he had a loved one that needed that as a treatment.
Most veterans have those
and so,
issues.
But you know, to certain people, that's
Right.
unacceptable, and all of a
Right.
sudden he's a rhino
Well-
because he's not in favor, or he's trying to advocate for medical marijuana.
Here's the purity test. You ready? This is how we follow this. Constitution.
Yeah.
What is the proper role of government?
Right. Which
That's-
actually Matt says in the comments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Proper
The,
role of
the
government.
Constitution should be the only purity.
That is
test.
it, because it literally, the national constitution, our United States Constitution and our state's constitution frames what the scope of practice or the scope of office that you're in,
Yes.
what you're supposed to, what you're allowed to do. And if you operate outside of that, then you're operating outside of the consent of the people, and
Yeah.
that makes you an unjust whoever you are. So that's the issue. That should be the purity test.
Right.
Do you know your constitution, and do you know what your parameters are?
Well, and again,
but I want to say this real quick.
Sorry.
These these individuals that are trying to manipulate and are trying to bully and they are trying to harass the leadership of this Republican organization of the YRs is very, I want to say very hateful, because when you start, if you can't use your words to eloquently express your position, and you just have, oh well, he's a rhino. What does that mean? What are we, 5? You're calling people rhinos? That doesn't
Yeah.
make any sense. And I think that people use that as almost like a way to.
Well, it's like based
trump-
on what?
Yeah, based on
Right.
because on you. I don't know you. I don't trust you.
Right.
And you're calling this person a rhino. Don't get me wrong. Again, I never thought I would be defending this consultant or even this prior political.
Well, and these consultants that are out there,
I thought I would never.
they have gotten more, not only him, but even some of, I mean, you name it.
Yes.
Because there's a handful, and it's a small pool of people, and I'm going to elaborate
What,
more on
maybe
that point.
10,
Yeah,
15
that
in
these
Hillsborough
political
County?
consultants, have and will get more Republicans elected than that guy, that particular individual, or the people barking about this issue ever will.
Yes.
Okay. And that's the truth of the matter. And so, again, when it is your livelihood, you're still not going to abandon your principles.
No.
It's,
Right.
but there are certain races where you're going to get into a nonpartisan race because guess what? That's going to help you put food on the table for your
Exactly.
family,
Yes.
and that's going to provide a living. And that person is close enough to your principles and maybe close enough to what you believe in to where you're willing to take them on as a client and
Right.
see them elected into office.
And these children that are throwing hissy fits on Facebook and on the comment section because they feel that it's not Republican enough or they're not conservative enough, they're acting like children.
What exactly are you doing in your community? Like, are you only complaining on Facebook, or are you actually being active and trying to make a difference?
Even better,
Yeah.
I have never seen you before. Where
Right.
have you been the last
Right.
5 or 6 cycles?
Sure.
Where have
Uh-oh.
you been? And this is we had this conversation back and forth
We did.
because they're like, oh, where's Allie been? Oh, I remember Allie from years ago.
Yes.
Attending meetings, going
Yes.
to rallies, everything else. I knew eventually that was the trajectory of Allie going to run for office. You automatically saw that direction.
I didn't.
I don't know.
He did. I didn't see that
But
a couple years ago.
you know these people that are active.
Right.
They're the rosy posters that will be at every event, that will go
Right.
to every event, that will make sure people are getting elected.
Yeah.
It's the Sherry. There's a group of people that are moving in that direction to get Republicans elected.
Yeah.
I don't see these other people.
No,
I
and
don't see them ever outside of Bruce B. Downs.
No,
honestly.
and oftentimes the people that make this an issue are the ones that think that sign waving on the corner is going to win you an election.
No.
Or that having 1,000-yard signs, which is again the inspiration of our show, is going to help you win an election. And to that matter, and to that point, the elected official that they're also being critical of. When someone has been in office as long as this individual has, and they've served at multiple state
Yes,
levels of
yeah.
government, guess what? Sometimes you're going to make bad decisions. And sometimes you're going to make decisions that maybe you didn't necessarily make, and maybe you don't have the full context of. And that's one of the things that I've learned, again, having been on just about all sides of the table. And I tell people, I've been on just about every side of the table of this political process, short of being a candidate myself. And it's amazing the perception versus the reality.
Right.
Because when you go to that senator, that congressman, that state representative, that school board member, and you confront them and you say, hey, what's up with this vote? Like, what happened here? And they give you the context, and they give you the full story. Then you start to understand how the process works.
You have to
then
build
you
those
understand that,
relationships.
you're going to have to make tough decisions that aren't going to align 100% maybe with what you wanted, but that was the road, the means to an end.
Right.
Right.
And you also have to understand the whole Robert's Rules of Order thing. If you don't know how that functions or how that operates, and you're somebody that's standing on the outside and you're looking in and you're like, well, why did you vote this way? And you understand and you don't understand Robert's Rule of Order, then that person's already labeled as a rhino. Or a dino, or whatever it is that they're calling these people.
No, but I agree. I think a lot of things that people don't understand is if you don't have a relationship with these people, then how on earth are you ever going to be able to
You're never going to know.
You're never going to know.
Yeah.
The best thing that we could have ever done as an organization was have the mayor, an elected official, go to our meetings. Because then, if there was a problem, I knew who exactly to talk to.
Right.
And she's seen my face, or they saw my face, so they know who I am.
Right.
And they know I'm not going to shout in their face. They know that I'm going to be a reasonable person, a reasonable constituent that wants an answer.
Yeah.
So when they did suspend liquor license, Jason, we were having these phone calls with those elected officials because we know them. We know Lewis, we know Guido, we know all these people, and we're like, bro, what's going on?
Where were all these people when it was time for them to go to actual city council meetings to stand up for these small businesses that were struggling with these liquor licenses? I know I was there. I was there.
Yeah.
Several other people were there,
Sure.
but I haven't seen the others that are sitting here calling these calling names,
Well,
complaining on Facebook.
And so, so there's a business owner. You all right over there?
Complex. I was trying to drink my tea, and they went down the wrong hole.
So in all of this, of course,
I might need a defibrillator. I don't know.
Oh no.
Defibrillator.
You okay?
I'm good.
All right.
Thank you. Sorry.
Just making sure.
I apologize.
But in all of this, with the pandemic, for instance, it's a great point. There was an owner of a venue that I got into a conversation, again, online, where horrible conversations are had. But he was taking issue with the way the governor was handling the pandemic. And I go, look, the governor is the reason that you're even allowed to open right now.
Correct.
Right. I go, you should be grateful. And I go, if you should be taking issue with anybody, it should be the city council and the mayor. They are the ones who are threatening to take your liquor license away because you want to have an event and because you have an open air venue where nobody would be, nobody's health would be in jeopardy. But they deemed that, you can't run your business, and they want to determine when you can and can't run your business.
Again, proper role of government, and this goes back to education and people not being properly educated on the parameters of our Constitution.
Right. And so all that to say that, again, and this happens every cycle. We get people that come into the fray and they're super pumped because they're angry about what they hear on the radio. They're angry about what they see on TV. And I get that. I understand that passion. I started there. That was me in 2007, right? And seeing Obama come up as a candidate, and I realized what that meant, right? That's what turned on the light bulb for me. And that's when I got involved. But you also have to understand that they are entertainers. Yeah. Fox News is an entertainment company. Okay, yeah. Charlie Kirk is an entertainer. Ben Shapiro is an entertainer. I'm not saying that what they say and they put out isn't valuable and isn't correct, but oftentimes doesn't completely align with reality. And so they have to be a little more forgiving, especially at the local level where they truly have no idea what's happening, and understand that, again, the Republican that could get 100% score from the Heritage Foundation that may represent, let's say, eastern Hillsborough County, is not going to get elected in downtown Tampa, to be a city council member. It's just not going to happen. Okay, but if you could find a moderate Republican, that could maybe socially appeal to the left, and maybe on the business side appeal to the right, based on those conservative principles, guess what? We could probably have 1 or 2 Republican city council members. But the problem is, because of this purity test, you have Republicans that are within the city limits that refuse to run for office because they know that they're going to be held to some imaginary standard that doesn't exist.
We have even issues with our own Republican Jewish community that is afraid of running county-wide because they don't think they're going to get the support of certain parts of the county because they're Jewish, and that's a stigma that really needs to stop.
Right. So
we're having these larger-than-life conversations when really we just need to get Republicans elected.
Right.
We were a 5-2 3 cycles ago. We are now a 2-5. Situation. What has occurred since then?
Yeah.
Not much, besides people not a lot of infighting. And so when you're at a BOCC meeting and you're just yelling at Oberman, yes, do I agree with what Oberman does? No, absolutely not. But I'm not going to be in her face yelling at her because that's not going to get anything done.
Solutionary.
You have to become solutionary. If you're going to be so combative, no one's going to do anything. They're just going to dig in their heels.
Listening.
And yeah, exactly. They're just going to stop listening. And we need to find Republicans that can run county-wide, which is very difficult.
Not only that, once you get a Republican into these seats, it's a lot easier to hold on to that seat. And that's the problem, is that we have had situations, and unfortunately the consultant that we were alluding to earlier is guilty of this, but we have situations where they'll put a candidate in a primary against another candidate just to take them out.
Yes.
Just for the simple fact of taking them out, because this consultant doesn't like this consultant, and they want to take each other out in a primary.
But what are you doing?
And
that's not helping the community that you're supposed to be serving.
But that's also helping their family put food on the table for their families. And again, that's why this is so much more than a black and white conversation. At the end of the day, do I like these consultants? No, I don't like a lot of them. And again, I'm very upset that I even have to defend this conversation because Republicans should be telling other Republicans who can and cannot speak
and I don't
at their own meetings.
I don't mind consultants going
becoming
out there.
communist.
It's very communistic.
We're participating in the overreach that we're trying to fight. It doesn't make any sense.
And I don't have
so
a problem
weird.
with consultants going out there to make races competitive, right? Because you want the stronger candidate to win.
Right.
But the problem is that when it's literally behind the scenes, that the average person doesn't realize what goes on behind the scenes in these campaigns. That sometimes a campaign consultant will literally put up a candidate against another candidate simply because they don't like each other. Has nothing to do with the candidates.
That's ridiculous.
Has nothing to do with the viability of those candidates. And that's where they run into problems. And so this is an issue that, again, I've brought to the attention of some of the people involved in this process that, we need to stop. If you have a viable candidate, by all means, put them up and may the best person win.
Right.
Okay? But to simply put up someone else to cancel out another candidate and stop that person winning just because you don't like the consultant,
it's ridiculous.
And that's where they get into problems. And that's where they tend to lose favor with people in the community because, again, they have stopped good people from getting elected into office. Anyways.
I want to say it's the nature of the beast. You're gonna constantly have consultants wanting to best other consultants, or they're gonna want to have their people in those races so they can run. Where I get very upset is when these consultants are using PACs to attack other candidates. Is when I get really upset about it. But then at the end of the day, I also understand the process, and I understand where dark money comes from. I understand all of this stuff. So it's not, I don't like it, but it happens. And as someone that helps with campaigns, we have to make sure our candidates are prepared for those attacks and are ready to rebut them as soon as they come out.
Right.
And again, it's all horseshit. But at the end of the day, and I'll say it's almost the majority of these attack ads are completely not true. And you're going to see it in CD13, you're going to see it in the BOCC cycle, you're going to see it in the school board cycle. And you just have to be prepared to see it and just be like, rip it up and throw it away.
Right.
That's how you stop this. You don't stop it by attacking the consultant. They don't care. They don't care at all.
No, because they're making money.
They're making money.
It don't matter.
They do not care. That's what I'm saying. It doesn't, you getting mad at them makes no difference.
It makes no difference.
The way you fix this is by you putting money and putting it into certain candidates, and when you see those attack ads, you blow it out of the water and you just rip it up. You should do it. Just rip it up and throw it away. Do a video of it, so then people know these attack ads are bullshit.
Right.
That's the only way this is ever going to stop. You attacking the consultant now does nothing. The consultant doesn't care.
Yeah.
You're not focusing on. It's like the whole slavery thing. you're not focusing on the purpose of it or the reason of it. You're just trying to make it into a bigger thing. You're trying to make it divisive.
Yep.
By you making divisive, you're not focusing on the fact that where the money comes from.
Well, look, and the biggest piece of advice I can give anybody, especially on the voting side, is turn off the television. Okay, that one's the worst one. Okay, you know what I mean? And look, when I was talking about Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro, again, brilliant guys. Okay, very talented at what they do, but do your homework. Do your own homework.
Yes.
Go in and read, again, why people vote the way they do. Call them, write emails, write or make appointments to meet with them, if they're a local elected official. But again, oftentimes the perception is not the reality.
Right.
And again, having worked for Senator Rubio, that's where I learned that firsthand. When all of a sudden you do get into the nuts and bolts of, well, why did he vote for this bill? Oh, well, that's because X, Y, and Z. And unless you have that context, on the surface, it may look terrible. And it may look like maybe he was voting against conservative principles. But then when you go and actually have context of the situation and realize, there was all this other stuff going on in the background, then you realize, what the true issue was at hand.
Right.
Most people don't understand that there's just the whole legislative process is far more complex than anybody really truly understands. All right. Well, on that note, again, thank you so much to Allie Marie Legg, Nebel David Cabrera for joining me on today's show. Again, thank you for watching The Yard Sign, the most important relevant podcast in politics. For the audio version of our podcast, head over to the tech overlords at Google, Apple, Spotify, Audible, and Amazon, and now iHeartRadio. We're going to go ahead and wrap up the show as we always do.
One more thing.
This thing's broken, by the way. We're going to have to go, as Travis said, we're going to have to get it recalibrated. But we're going to end tonight's show and talk about the one last thing that we didn't get to on tonight's show. So a story, an issue, maybe something that's out there that we didn't get to touch on tonight, but that you happen to be watching closely. Being that you're our guest, I'll let you go second after Nebel, so it gives you some time to think on it.
Yeah, because I need some time.
Yeah. But what story are you watching?
So today I have been listening.
Foreign policy.
It's not even foreign. Well, it's a little foreign policy. The last few weeks, China has been systematically stopping certain regions within their country from allowing them to do crypto mining, which has caused the price of a coin to drop almost down to $30,000 at its high of almost 60 a few weeks ago. It's something that I kind of predict. I don't want to say predicted. It makes sense though, because it's a speculative market. And so because it's a speculative market, it's something that's not really based on anything, nor is it an asset, but people like to pretend that it's an asset, which is perfectly fine. Throw away your money. I don't care. Again, I love the idea of the technology behind it and the real world way that it'll start to change the way we do banking and financials. That's what I'm really looking forward to when it comes to the blockchain technology. But when it comes to actually becoming a actual form of currency, it's very difficult, especially if China doesn't want it to be a currency. China's not going to let it. And about 90% of mining was occurring in China, which is crazy. But again, something else that if you own a coin of some kind, you were contributing to the Chinese People's Republic Economic Forum. So good job, guys.
All right, are you ready, Allie, or do you need
No,
a few more
I
minutes?
think I'm going to have to tap out on this one. I've been so focused on campaigning and focused
Well,
on
and it could
local
be
stuff.
related. It could be related to your campaign. Maybe there's a school issue that that maybe is starting to bubble up or something like that. But I'll give you a minute or two if you need it.
Okay, no, I think I have I have one.
Go for it.
A few days ago, it's been brought to my attention that there's two things. So I've had a few teachers come to me and tell me that ESE has always been a problem. Our special needs kids are being underserved, and that's an issue, and that's across all of Hillsborough County. Those are the most phone calls that a lot of our school board members have received, and we need to make change with that. Something needs to happen. There needs to be an ESC committee oversight or something in order for these kids to not fall through the cracks, and that's really near and dear to my heart, being that I have a child who is special needs. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that there could be an organization that is trying to strong arm our school board in mandating the COVID-19 vaccine, which is still under EUA.
Right. It's
still under emergency use authorization. Being that the mask mandate has been lifted, that might be a possibility for next year, and that's an issue because you can't federally and legally mandate a emergency use authorized experimental medication.
And I don't believe it's been cleared for children.
It has, well, 12, they're trying to get it lower than 12, so 5 to 12, they're trying to get it.
I don't know why.
I don't
know
either.
why.
Right.
The science doesn't show that children are affected by this.
Right.
It's very minimal that they, will have fatalities. They get sick. All kids get sick. That's just a normal part of being a child, but that helps build their immune system. They're not at risk for this
Right.
in that detrimental, aspect.
Unless they have pre-existing conditions
Correct.
like adults.
Right. Well, I also have pre-existing conditions, and I've had
Right.
COVID twice. So,
Yeah.
and I'm still here. But that's not.
Well, but that's the
not
thing.
for
The
everybody.
mortality rate is still,
Right.
at around 1%.
And it should be. It should honestly be parental choice. It shouldn't be a
Sure.
condition of,
Of course not.
participating in taxpayer-funded schools, and
Right.
that would be my issue.
Are
That's
we-
what
That's
I'm
a good
watching.
one.
Are we going to start talking about the Wuhan virus? are we going to start? Are we allowed? To
Are we
talk
allowed?
about
Are we
it?
Yeah,
allowed?
no
I don't
kidding.
know.
Well, it's funny because anytime we have that as one of our topics,
gets
there's a little
flagged.
banner.
Yeah.
There's a little banner that gets flagged
Will
on.
this create the banner?
So-
I don't know.
Yeah, I
Sorry,
don't
guys.
know. I don't know if the dialogue triggers the banner or if it's just the titling of the episode. But all right, we'll see.
Find out.
'Cause it wasn't in our list of topics. For me actually, and it's kind of a 2-in-1 really, because I know you wanted to mention it, Anibal, but some very interesting polling coming out about Governor Ron DeSantis, showing him in a very strong position for 2024. I will tell you again, you want to educate yourself properly. Shut off Fox News and go and watch the other guys that you don't agree with, okay? That, to me, is the best education you can get because you begin to understand the other side of the argument and what they're really up to and what their goals really are. Unfortunately, these days, that comes by the ways of the Lincoln Project, which is former Republicans who basically left the party because Trump won the election. And, a good friend of mine, Rick Wilson, who's the head of that organization, was talking about how difficult it's going to be to beat Ron DeSantis. And so they fully acknowledge that. Now, funny enough, he didn't mention Charlie Crist at all, because I think the most delicious serving of irony would be a former Republican who hated Charlie Crist having to then support Charlie Crist because he's now actively working against anyone associated with Trump. They were solely focusing on Nikki Fried, who basically already shot her campaign in the foot in a CNN interview. If you haven't seen it, it's spectacular. The CNN anchor just completely destroys her. The entire foundation of her campaign just shot in a 2-minute interview. But really, the reason I wanted to bring that up is because he also had a huge win with. We good? Mm-hmm. Okay. With in the courts, basically saying that the cruise industry did not have to adhere to the CDC guidelines to operate here in Florida. In other words, when you decide to take that cruise later on this year and not have to wear a mask while you're on board, you can thank Governor Ron DeSantis for that.
Yes, the CDC is not considered law; it is
No.
considered guidance.
Yes.
Right. And truly, the bigger point about all of this is that the cruise ships are going to play ball with whoever they have to play ball with.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to curry favor and just be like, oh, I guess we have to do this or we don't have to do.
They don't.
Like, they don't want this. They don't want to have all these protocols and guidelines
Right.
because that's cost to them, right? That's additional costs that go into play. So they're not going to come out and say that
Correct.
they agree with the governor on this. But this is going to allow the cruise industry to reopen a lot earlier than expected. And I can tell you from people that I know in the industry, and I'm talking all the cruise lines are making major moves right now to get operational within the next couple months.
They need to.
Because they are seeing the green light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
And they are pumped and they are hurting for money. So we're going to start seeing cruise ships back here in Florida very soon. And like most things with this pandemic, we're going to be ahead of the curve. And I think the statistics I've seen is that based on when we reopened, and the economic gains that we've made since then have been somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 billion in terms of an impact to the economy. based on Governor DeSantis' managing of the pandemic and the reopening of the economy here in Florida. And so I'm excited to see the cruise industry come back into play. I'm also interested to see how it works out. I mean, we've seen already a cruise ship come back that supposedly everybody was vaccinated.
Out of the Mediterranean.
And then you got 2 people that came back with COVID, because COVID doesn't prevent you from getting the freaking virus.
Right.
The vaccine doesn't.
The
vaccine doesn't.
Watch it with the crystal ball. We can't lose it.
But the vaccine, and so again, the vaccine doesn't prevent you from getting it. It just softens the symptoms that you experience.
It's literally written into the literature.
Right.
Yeah.
So all you have to do is go look it up.
What? You have to read
Oh,
to get the proper information? Fauci liar.
Like, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. Like,
Neither am I.
And that's the thing. It's
Neither
just,
am I.
but it's like, just educate yourself on the damn thing. You know what I
Personal
mean?
health choice. That's all I gotta say.
Right.
That's all I gotta say.
It's like when Trump was going out there talking about drinking bleach. Guess what? I'm not going to do it.
He also didn't
Obviously,
say
he didn't
drinking
say that.
Well, I
And there
know,
is
but I'm just,
actually
you know.
a medical, listen, I'm not even gonna get into that.
Oy vey. Anyways, shout out to Crystal and Sagar for coming out with their new show, Breaking Point. It's awesome. You guys should go watch it.
Yes.
I think it's something that I still watch The Hill.
Who we aspire to.
Who we aspire to. But I think they have a really good balance, even though sometimes I hate the conservative version of what they're talking about. You have to at least sit through it so that you can understand what the other side is thinking.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, there are many, I won't sit through a CNN.
Sagar's definitely a New York Republican.
Yeah, and
he's definitely a Rockefeller
But he
Republican.
doesn't deny it. That's
No.
what I love about it. He
embraces
he is
it.
Unapologetically.
He's unapologetic when it comes to the kind of Republican that he is. And that's fine, because you know what? That works in D.C. and New York.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, he'll get crucified in rural parts of Hillsborough County.
Yeah.
But it is what it is.
But him, or that show, having the early success that it has, again, inspires me to continue to do this program. And it also, the clashing of the Joe Rogan podcast with Crystal and Sager, to me, is just like, it's like basically like when, I think it was like Jay-Z performed with like the New York Philharmonic or something like that. I mean, there was some concert like that. It's just like the clashing of 2 worlds that you never thought you would see together, and it just making complete sense. Because it was just so beautifully done. And so it's definitely check out Crystal and Sager. Not that they need our help, but they again, people talk about, because I tell people I don't watch any of the cable news networks. And so they were like, how do you inform yourself? I read a lot, and I read multiple stories on the same, multiple versions of the story of the same story.
Yeah.
And I look for outlets that are not entirely controlled by the media conglomerates, and The Hill's one of them.
Yes.
Did they have advertisers and media partners and stuff that they, certainly didn't want to piss off? Absolutely. But they certainly weren't as controlling over the editorial content of that particular show as, you would see on a cable news network. Where again, like, I love Sean Hannity, and in fact, he and I came through the same radio station in Huntsville, Alabama. Okay, he is a walking talking point for the Republican Party, and that's great. That works for him. But they're not fallible, and so it's that freedom that comes along with having your own platform and doing your own program where you're not accountable to anybody.
The first 10 minutes of Tucker Carlson, I love it. I love it to death. I can't go any further than that.
Yeah.
I just can't. Once he starts getting to the minutia, I'm like, I'm done. I can't.
Well, and that often, and we're getting off on a terrible tangent.
More tangents.
But it's the same thing that everybody's been talking about the entire day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's repetitive.
Repackaged. It's just a different talking head, and so, all right. Anyways, thank you again to Allie Marie. I'm sure it's not going to be the last time we'll have you on.
I hope not.
I'd love to have you on a few more times before you get elected into office.
Hey.
Best of luck to you. Thank you, as always, to my fill-in host and always co-host, Anibal David Cabrera, and to those of you still watching,
Thanks.
almost
We
2 hours
appreciate
in. Good God.
Hey, long form. Rogan said long form.
Anibal and I are going to be on the couch tonight. On that note, don't forget to subscribe to the audio version of our podcast.
Maybe the same couch.
Yeah, that's right. The tech overlords, or the Google box, as Nebo likes to call it. Google, Apple, Spotify, Audible, and Amazon platforms will carry the audio version of the show. The video version of the show you can find right here on Facebook and YouTube. On behalf of my guests, I'm Johnny Torres. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you back here next Monday. Have a great night, everybody. So long.